Hello everyone. Welcome to the third workshop in our Shimmering Snowdrift color palette. This one I call Shimmering Snow, and the colors that I have here are Cool White, and as I mentioned in the guide, you can add just the tiniest little pinch of blue to make your normal white a cool white, or you can just use white out of the bottle. There's nothing wrong with that. I've got silver, just to show you two of my favorite silvers to use. I really love the Extreme Sheen Silver. I also really like the Love Color Silver Flash, although this is hard to find in stores. You'd probably have to order it online. But I love both of those as silvers. This is Sweet Mint. Then we have Spa Blue, Turquoise, and Turquoise Blue. And you'll see that these three blues here, they're a little faded out on the camera, but it's just a dark, medium, and light turquoise. So if you don't want to buy three colors, you can just use your turquoise, add a little bit of white, and add a whole lot of white. So those are my colors that we're using. And then in addition, I'm going to use Nuvo drops in Neptune Turquoise. This is kind of in between, it's kind of a pale blue-green. It looks a little silver on camera, but it is a blue-green color, and I'm going to use this quite a bit. If you do not want to get the Nuvo drops, you can just pick any accent color that you would like to use. If you've got bliss drops, those work just as well, or you can just use a stylus and normal paint. It does not have to be exactly the same. I have my surface here. It is 12 inches, about 30 centimeters, and I've got my background painted black. As you know, and as we play with occasionally, changing your background color can drastically change the way a piece looks. So don't be afraid to change up your background color if you want to. I'm going to use black. Oops, sorry, I bumped the camera. I feel like black really makes the colors stand out. So I really like to use black as a background, but feel free to change that up. And I've got my, I'm using a 16 arm stencil, same as I always use. And then I've just extended my lines out to the edge, and I've got rings every centimeter starting in the center. And so with all that said, let's get started. I'm gonna have a big old 15 millimeter center dot. So I'm using a 15 millimeter tool. If you don't have a 15 millimeter tool, but you have a compass, you would just set it to 1.5 centimeters and you could make your circle. So I've done that as well, but I do have a 15 millimeter dotting tool, so you can either paint it on or dot it on. And I'm going to use my turquoise blue, which is my darkest turquoise. And I hate making these big dots. I actually should have started with the smaller one. I like to start with the smaller one first and kind of squish it out. These large tools tend to get bubbles underneath, and I hate that. I feel like they never squish out properly to a perfect circle. And because I play with it and adjust it a little bit, that 15 probably ends up being closer to 15.5. This one's pretty close to perfect. And just kind of spread out the paint a little bit so I don't have a big glob in the middle. And then there is our center dot. So that was a big one. 15 millimeters for the center. Right, take the center nice and slow. It is important that we get our center dot perfect. All right, next I'm going to grab my 2 millimeter rod. I like to use rods instead of styluses when I'm making dots. I prefer styluses when I'm moving the paint, when I'm making swishes and swoops, but either one is fine. 2 millimeter stylus or a 2 millimeter rod. And we're going to use Sweet Mint, and I'm going to do a ring of 16 around our center dot. I like to start with my top, bottom, left, and right dots first. I feel like those help me center things, and then I do halfway in between those. That gives me 8. And then halfway in between those gives me 16. Remember to hold your tools straight up and down at a 90-degree angle. Breathe in and out while you make your dots. Don't hold your breath. And dip and dot each and every time. Next, I'm going to get my 3mm tool. This time I'm going to use Turquoise, which is my medium turquoise color, and we're going to create another ring of 16. These are offset, so these go in the spaces. The second ring of dots should be about the 2-centimeter ring from the center. So as we work our way out, that is our 2-centimeter, this is 3. I just mark this so I can help keep track. So I've got lines, guidelines I've got rings every centimeter. So this second ring here is on our 2-centimeter circle there. Next, what I'm going to do is get my Nuvo drops, and let's see, I am going to do a ring of pins that we pull towards the center. So I'm going to set my paint aside. I'm going to make sure my Nuvo drops will come out easily. I am going to get a stylus to help pull my Nuvo drops. And what I'm going to do is on my 3-centimeter ring, I'm going to create a ring of Nuvo drops, and I'm going to pull these inward to create pins. So I'm just doing a couple at a time. And I'm pulling them right in between the dots. So I'm doing a couple at a time. What I try not to do, what I don't recommend doing, is doing all 16 of them and then pulling them into pins, because the paint starts to dry and then it's not as easily movable. This Neptune color is a really pretty color of Nouveau drops. I've had it for a while and I have not really used it in anything yet, and I love it. All right, so you want to create that ring of pins there with your Nouveau drops. I've got a little smudge here that I am going to fix before I move on. Sometimes I'll wait and see if they get covered with the pattern, but that one was pretty big, so might as well get it before it gets in the way, right? Next, what I'm going to do, I'm going to get my 2.5mm stylus. I'm going to use Spa Blue, which is my lightest turquoise. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a set of double dots. I'm going to do one outside and one inside. So we've got this line here, this 3 centimeter from the center line. I'm going to put one just outside that line and one just in that line. So you dip once and then dot, dot, dip again, dot, dot, and we're going to do that all the way around. All right, next I'm going to get an 8mm rod. I'm going to open my silver paint. And we are going to place a silver dot on each line. And I want it to be in between the two dots. I'm going to nudge it up kind of as close as it's comfortable. So I'm not exactly going on ring 4, just it's going to overlap it just a little bit, as you can see. So it's not quite halfway. Of course, it's okay if it is halfway. So we're going to do 16 dots in silver. Go nice and slow. Sometimes with these metallic colors, they are a little thicker, a little goopier. They have to do that because metallic colors are basically just mica powder suspended in paint. There we go, ring of 16. I'm going to take just a second and pop a few of these bubbles. Next, I am going to go back to my Nuvo drops, and we are going to create longer pins. So these pins, I'm going to skip a ring. I'm going to start them around ring 6, and I'm going to use my Nuvo drops again. I want the dot, whereas up here the dot was closer to 3 millimeters, I want this one to be closer to maybe 4 millimeters in size, a little bit larger. So these are going in the spaces. Once you have the dots there, you're going to grab a stylus and pull it inward in between that ring of dots we just made. Remember, just to do a few at a time. I have to do kind of a double swipe here to get it all the way down where it's supposed to go. So when you're done with that, it should look something like this. Alright, I am going back to paint. We are going to use Cool White. I'm going to use my 2.5 millimeter stylus. I'm also going to have my 2 millimeter stylus handy, so 2 and 2.5. First, what I'm going to do with my Cool White is I'm going to make a center dot right above these pins. Once I have the center dot all the way around, I'm going to use the 2 millimeter tool and I'm going to walk the dots on each side. after you finish that, we are going to go back to Spa Blue, which is the lightest turquoise. I'm going to use a 3mm rod, and right above each of these pins, I'm going to do a dip and dot, and then a dip and dot for the center, and I'm going to create a 3-dot crown or a triple dot crown. And this crown is kind of centered on ring number 7, or our 7-centimeter ring. Make sure you dip and dot each time to keep the sizing consistent. Right, for the next step, we are going to turn these into petals by dragging some long swipes down the side. And I'm going to use my 3mm tool. I'm going to continue with Spa Blue. And this, if you are a brushstroke person, you could totally do this with a brushstroke. I'm not going to. I'm going to use my stylus. I personally feel like I have more control and I do better with the stylus. So I'm going to dip in my blue paint. Pull down about halfway. You'll see I don't make it all the way. And then I'm just going to lift and start back at the top and do the same thing. So I pull halfway, go back to the top, and then pull it back down. And if they are not all consistent, remember, we can always go back with a small stylus and kind of fix where they start and stop. So I'll do a few, and then I'll kind of tidy these up a bit. When doing these long swipes, the slower you go, the farther you can get with them. So that may be a helpful tip for you. All right, next, I am gonna get my 6mm rod and right next to or on ring 7, in between these petals, on the lines, I'm going to place one turquoise blue dot. Now this is my middle turquoise. So in between these petals goes a dot. Once you have those 16 dots, we are going to do a ring of 32. And so these are going to go on every line and then in between on every space. I'm at ring 8, so I'm going to start these just outside ring 8. First, I'm going to do all my lines. So you'll see I've got these between ring 8 and 9. Once I have the ones on every line placed, then I'm going to go back through and do one halfway in between. All right, once you have all 32 of those 8mm dots, what we're gonna do is we're gonna replicate this petal design somewhat. This time it's gonna go on each line, okay? So that's where we're gonna put it. Again, I am gonna go out a ways. We want it to be kind of a long petal. I'm using the Nuvo drops, and I'm gonna place my dot right on ring 16. I'm sorry, ring 11. Again, you want your dots to be about 4 millimeters in size. You're going to make a couple and then pull them down. So we're going to make these swipes with Nuvo drops. Sometimes with the longer swipes, you have to go in and encourage them a little bit. All right, next we are going to get our 3mm stylus and our 2.5mm stylus. We're going to replicate what we did up here again. So with the 3mm tool, Cool White, center dot, and then we're going to walk the dots on each side with 2.5mm. So once you have all your 3mm dots, we're going to go 2.5mm and we're going to walk the dots on each side. Once you've walked the dots around each one of those swipes, we're going to get a 4mm rod, and we are going to do the triple dot crown again. So it's dip and dot, dip and dot, dip and dot. And this is centered on ring 12. I'm using Sweet Mint, 4mm, and we're doing a triple dot crown. Alright, we are going to replicate the swoops on each side, but additional step this time, I'm going to take my 3mm rod. We're going to continue using Sweet Mint, and I'm just going to add a set of 2 dots extending that petal, or extending the tip of that crown into the petal. So this is 3mm Sweet Mint, 2 dots next to each petal. Once you finish that step, the next step is to get a 3mm stylus, or again, you can use a brush stroke if you like to use brushes. We're using Sweet Mint, and we're gonna finish these petals by creating a swoop on each side. Again, these are longer, so if you're using your 3mm stylus, I'm using my 3mm stylus here, so I kind of have to pull 1, 2, 3 times to get it all that way. All right, next we are going to use silver. I'm going to open my silver paint here. We're going to use a 10mm rod, and in between each petal we're going to place a 10mm dot, and these pretty much get centered. For me, I'm right on ring 10. So silver paint, 10mm rod. These are going in the spaces between the petals on ring 10 or thereabouts. Right, once you have those 16 silver dots, what we are going to do is in the spaces in between these petals, we're going to create one more petal. Now, if you need a visual, you can make a line in between, okay? But these are not on our 16 lines. These are actually in the spaces. Sometimes it's helpful visually to give yourself that line. So that's what I am doing. but technically we're working in the spaces. All right, once again, we are going to use our Nuvo drops. I'm going to have a stylus handy, and I'm not going to go all the way to the edge because I've got a little part of the pattern I'm going to include there. I'm going to start on ring 13. Again, I'm going to make my dot about 3, could be 3 to 4 millimeters. It's okay to do a few at a time, and then I'm going to pull that inward towards that silver dot. We're going to end up with 16 of these. All right, for the next step, we're going to create a little embellishment at the top of these petals before we walk the dots. So I'm going to get my turquoise blue paint. I'm going to use the darkest color first, and I'm going to get a 6mm tool, and we are going to create large teardrops. So I'm going to put this at the outermost edge. I'm going to make my dot, and then I'm going to use a stylus to pull that into a teardrop shape. And we're going to do this all the way around. So 6mm, your darkest turquoise blue, we're making teardrops. right, after you finish those teardrops, we're going to get a 4mm tool. We're going to use our turquoise, which is the middle of the three colors, the middle of the three shades of blue. And then on each side of the teardrop shapes here, we are going to create another teardrop. So we're going to place a dot on each side of the petal, one on the left, one on the right, and then we are going to teardrop that inward. last part of this element, what we're going to do is use a 3mm stylus, and we're going to pull a swoop. We're not going to walk the dots this time, but we're going to pull a swoop downward. On each side. So this is Spa Blue, 3mm stylus, pulling a swipe downward. Right, next I'm going to get my turquoise blue, my darkest turquoise, and a 5mm stylus. And at the base of each petal, so in between the silver dot and the petal here that we created, at that base I'm going to make a little 5mm dot. So this is turquoise blue, 5mm. And that just kind of finishes off that petal. I've got one more step before I'm going to let this dry and do top dots. I'm going to open up my Cool White, get my 8mm dotting rod, and in between each petal, I believe this is between ring 12 and 13 on the lines, place one 8mm dot. So 16 cool white dots. Now, this is the base of the design. So I'm going to go ahead and let this dry for a few hours, and then I'm going to come back and show you what I did for top dots. Now, there is a lot of negative space. You can see a lot of the black. If you don't like that, feel free to add some more to this design. You can certainly fill it up. I like seeing the black through it, but if that's not your thing, absolutely, you can go back in and add more elements. The key here is just to make sure that you do it evenly all the way around. So I'm going to go ahead and let this dry completely, and then we will come back and do a layer of tops. I'll see you in the top dot video. All right, everybody, I am back and ready to do top dots. I have let this completely dry and I've wiped off my guidelines. And so I'm going to start with my center. For the center dot, I'm going to do 2 top dots. The first is going to be 10 millimeters, and this base color is turquoise blue. So I'm going to do a 10 millimeter dot in turquoise, and then once that's dry, I'm going to come back and I'm going to do the spa blue. So I'm going to get my 10 millimeter rod and turquoise, and I'm going to get my middle color put on here. Then what I'm going to do, we've got these dots right here, which are 6 millimeter dots. So I'm going to go down to a size 4 millimeter. I'm going to use my darkest turquoise. So this is turquoise blue, and this is a turquoise blue dot right on top of that lighter blue. Next, I'm going to add top dots on this ring of 32. I am going to get my 5 millimeter dotting rod, and I'm going to use Sweet Mint. And on top of this ring of 32, we have 5 millimeter dots. 3mm. You can use a rod or a stylus. And at the base of this petal design here, we've got 5mm. I'm going to use my 3mm tool and put a 3 of Cool White right in the center. All right, next we're going to add top dots to these cool white outside dots. I'm going to use my darkest turquoise, my turquoise blue, and my 5mm rod. And each of these dots on the outside are going to get a dark turquoise top dot. Right. Now the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my Nuvo drops back out, and be careful because we've got paint on all areas of this, but in this inner ring of silver dots I'm going to add a top dot with my Neptune Nuvo, and then in this outer ring of silver I'm also going to add a top dot with my Nuvo. So be cautious not to put your hand in paint, but I'm going to be doing top dots with the Nuvo drops. And when you're doing this, you just kind of have to use your judgment, but I'm aiming for about a 4mm dot in there. And I'm choosing to use Nuvo versus rhinestones or anything like that on this design because I'm working on a tray. Of course, you can modify the design however you want depending on what you're working with. I want a little thickness, but not too much thickness. So these Nuvo drops are perfect for me. So I've done this inner ring of silver. Now I'm going to do this outer ring of silver. I want these to be a little bit bigger. this is just about it for those top dots, with the exception of this center dot here. So for the center dot, I am going to go back in with a 5mm rod and Spa Blue. All right, make sure whenever you do that third dot in the middle that your center is dry enough to do that. But for the sake of the video, I'm going to put my Spa Blue dot right on top. And that is the end of this design. Now, of course, you can go crazy with top dots. You can add as many as you want to finish your piece. A lot of people will add third and fourth layers, and that's totally fine. I can't wait to see what you create, so please share with me, either in the Facebook group or the share space. I would love to see what you create. I would love to see any variations on this design that you make. Thank you so much for joining me this month for the Shimmering Snowdrift color palette. I will see you next month, everyone. Thank you so much.